How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Hope you have all had a great week. Now, I do have a Patreon up and running. If you're not already a member, for as little as $3 a month, you can get a whole extra episode of Thorn's Jungle a week, which you can link up to your Spotify and all sorts of things like that. So, let's get into it. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about probably the most interesting, or one of the most interesting baboon species there is. There's 6 species of baboons, and all of them, except for one, are found on the continent of Africa. Now, that one species that isn't is the Hamadryas baboon. It is the only baboon species that occurs outside of Africa. So, for those of you that don't know what a Hamadryas baboon looks like, it's probably the most distinguishable of all the 6 species of baboons. The males, once they get to about 10 years of age, grow this huge mane, or cape as they call it, and their hair becomes a silvery white color. And they also get this like real reddish pinkish face, and they're also twice the size of the female. So if you look at the female Hamadryas baboons, they're much, much smaller, and they're kind of just like a normal brown color. They do get a little bit of that pinky red face, but for the most part, they look kind of bland, I guess, compared to those adult males. And if you've ever seen the movie, what's it called? The Rundown? It's also called Welcome to the Jungle in other parts of the world. It's basically an early movie starring The Rock, or Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and that dude, that Stifler from American Pie. Great movie, really good movie. But they get attacked by baboons, which is unusual because they're supposed to be in South America and baboons don't occur in South America. But anyway, the baboons they get attacked by undoubtedly Hamadryas baboons. I mean, they just stand out. Like, they're obviously Hamadryas baboons. You can't really mistake those male Hamadryas baboons for any other species of baboon. But another interesting thing about Hamadryas baboons is, like, how did they get to the Arabian Peninsula? So they're native to the Horn of Africa, which is Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, and also they're native to parts of the Arabian Peninsula. So the Sarawak Mountains of southwestern Arabia, Yemen, Saudi Arabia. And a lot of scientists are sort of like, well, how did they get there? Did they come from, Africa and make their way across somehow? And it gets kind of interesting when you sort of learn the history of Hamadryas baboons, especially amongst ancient Egyptians. So, Hamadryas baboons were worshipped all throughout ancient Egypt. I mean, they were highly regarded by the god Thoth, and if you know of Thoth, depends how you want to say it, he's that gentleman with the human body and the head of the ibis. He's like the god of wisdom and justice and knowledge. He's like a pretty up there god. And he highly regarded Hamadryas baboons. They even sometimes depict a form of Thoth as a Hamadryas baboon. And there are actually a few gods or godlike deities that take form of Hamadryas baboons. One of them is sort of in charge of the judgment after you die, so the weighing of the heart and things like that. Another one is in charge of guarding the river of fire in Duat, which is like the Egyptians' form of, I guess, the underworld or an afterlife that they go to shortly after death. So for thousands of years, Hamadryas baboons were worshipped in ancient Egypt. There are mummified Hamadryas baboons buried with pharaohs, And you have to be pretty high ranking to have a Hamadryas baboon mummified and entombed with you. There are carvings, wooden statues of Hamadryas baboons. There's uh, loads and loads of hieroglyphs that depict Hamadryas baboons. So they were pretty well worshipped in ancient Egypt. But the interesting thing is that Hamadryas baboons, as far as we know in the fossil record, were never native to Egypt. Ever. They can't find any fossilized remains or any remains of Hamadryas baboons that are older than, 2 or 3 thousand years, which is kind of confusing. It's like, why, like, how would you worship an animal as a god if you went and got that god from somewhere else and brought it back? Because Hamadryas baboons certainly did exist in Egypt, but they were brought there by the Egyptians from somewhere else. And studies are kind of looking into it as to where these Hamadryas baboons came from. So we've got to take it all the way back to how Hamadryas baboons actually dispersed out of Africa and across the Red Sea into Arabia. And there are a few theories as to how this happened. So one theory is the northern sort of crossing, so north of the Red Sea. The Arabian Peninsula was connected via a land bridge, but that was in the Pliocene, which was like 5 million years ago. And scientists are looking at that and going, yeah, mammals certainly did cross between Africa and Arabia via this land bridge, but there is no evidence that Hamadryas baboons did at that time. They did, but not that early. So there's another theory, the southern crossing, which happened during the late Pleistocene, which could be anywhere from 130,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago. And that one seems more plausible because that's roughly the time where they started finding the evidence of that, the fossil evidence that Hamadryas baboons made that crossing around about then. But the only thing is that southern crossing from the African continent to the Arabian Peninsula, it very well may have formed a land bridge at that time, but there's no actual evidence of that. Looking at certain models, they can see that it was possible. Therefore, that method, the southern crossing, is sort of more favorable amongst scientists, that hypothesis. Basically what happened as well, scientists took mummified Hamadryas baboons that were, buried or entombed in with pharaohs and things like that, and they did DNA studies of the flesh of those baboons to try and pinpoint whether or not the Egyptians were getting these baboons by crossing the Red Sea into Arabia and taking them from there. Looking at certain ancient Egyptian depictions, obviously the Egyptians were very good at keeping records of things via hieroglyphics or just carvings in walls and things like that. They saw like I guess a story of Egyptians coming back from a place called, it's spelt Punt, but I'm sure it's not pronounced Punt. It's probably like Punt. Let's say Punt. Coming back from this exotic place called Punt that the Egyptians describe as being like real weird and different, and you can buy all sorts of strange things that are different to what you can get in Egypt. It's like, yeah, this lost land of Punt. And basically, to solve the mystery of where Hamadryas baboons came from, they kind of have to solve the location of this legendary place of Punt, which is pretty cool. It's like solving two mysteries at once. It's almost like the Atlanteans, Atlantis, where was Atlantis? Nobody really knows, but there are a few theories knocking about. But this one, it seems pretty easy. Okay, if they're bringing these baboons from this place called Punt, uh, if we can find where these baboons, DNA can be traced back to, because obviously that city of Punt is long lost, but it's got to be somewhere. It's either on the Arabian Peninsula or it's on Africa. And doing these DNA studies on the mummified remains of the Hamadryas baboons, the DNA matched closely with Hamadryas baboons from the Horn of Africa, which is pretty cool because what that suggests is the Egyptians weren't going across the Red Sea to Arabia to get their Hamadryas baboons. They were going down to the southern point of the Red Sea and not only getting Hamadryas baboons from there, but they were getting, spices and all sorts of exotic things from this place of Punt. Now, they can't pinpoint exactly which country it is, whether it's Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, but it's from that area. And obviously, back then, those countries didn't exist as they do now. So it's pretty safe to say that Punt, this long lost, legendary, exotic city with all these, unusual markets, Punt was that area, which is pretty damn cool. So they kind of solved that mystery as well. So for at least 3 or 4 thousand years, they had been importing the Hamadryas baboons from the Horn of Africa and to Egypt. Now, the population of Hamadryas baboons already existed on the Arabian Peninsula. So these were still African Hamadryas baboons. And actually, DNA samples show that they can't even, although they've been split for thousands of years, the Arabian ones and the African ones, they're still the same species. They haven't diverged that much to really speciate or anything like that. There are some studies that show the Arabian Hamadryas baboons maybe a little bit smaller than the African ones, but really no significant difference between the two. So for thousands of years, the ancient Egyptians were importing, sailing down to Punt, getting some baboons, getting some spices, getting some of that Djiboutian booty, no, whatever they're getting from down there, and bringing it back to Egypt, worshipping them, burying them with the pharaohs, things like that. And there is actual historical evidence, so ruins and things like that, of courtyards in ancient Egypt that were used to house these Hamadryas baboons. But the problem there is they needed huge walls to house these baboons. Back then, I doubt they were very good with animal husbandry. It's pretty much, let's just chuck it in an area and feed it and it'll be fine. But because baboons climb, very good climbers, they needed pretty high walls on these courtyards. Now, what happens when you have high walls on an area? It causes a lot of shade. That means these Hamadryas baboons that were being kept in captivity weren't receiving much sunlight. So they weren't absorbing much vitamin D, and that causes a whole range of problems. It causes all sorts of bone defects and things like that, which they can basically see in every mummified Hamadryas baboon they find. When they do studies on it, they can tell that these baboons were not only malnourished food-wise, so they weren't fed proper diets, they were also malnourished in bone density, and they had all sorts of bone deformations. Deformation? It's not deformation. Deformities. That's the word I was looking for. So they had all sorts of bone deformities as well. So they weren't kept in great conditions. Certainly not conditions good enough for long-term housing of these baboons. But hey, they can just sail back down to Punt and grab some more. you know, these baboons probably weren't kept long term if they were being used to be buried with high ranking ancient Egyptians. They don't wait for those baboons to die of old age when they mummify them and bury them. Let's just put it that way. So, what happened ultimately to the Hamadryas baboons of Egypt? Well, we know that after the 16th century, Hamadryas baboons in Egypt were no more. They just eventually all died out, all the captive ones and things like that. Basically, around the 16th century, old world worship of, pharaohs, things like that, that kind of died out. That pre-dynastic sort of era of old world, ancient Egyptian worship, things like that. It got old and people moved on. Like today, they don't have a pharaoh, they don't mummify people anymore. So when that worshipping and things like that died out, so did the Hamadryas baboons. They were no longer sought after for captivity or to be worshipped or to be sacrificial in any way. So after the 16th century, there are no more Hamadryas baboons in Egypt. Egypt would never really be suitable habitat for Hamadryas baboons anyway. When the Hamadryas baboons crossed the land bridge into the Arabian Peninsula, there were bouts of green flourishment in those areas. And they can see that in fossil records and carbon dating certain things. So that journey that the Hamadryas baboons took over that land bridge did, form hospitable environments for them. Now, when you say land bridge, it's like, it's not a big bit of land that just popped up overnight. You're talking thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands of years that it rose and then eventually went down again. Sometimes millions of years, especially if we're talking about the northern land bridge on the Red Sea. So in that time, plants can grow if the conditions are right, and it causes suitable habitat for the baboons to cross that land bridge. And it's not like they go on a journey across the land bridge. No, they live there for a while and eventually they'll make their way onto that peninsula. And then a few thousand years, the water levels rise again, as they've been doing for about 4.5 billion years. And now you've got a isolated population of baboons on the Arabian Peninsula. Pretty cool. So it's an interesting story. I'm not sure if any other baboon species have a story quite like that. And most people will look at all the artifacts that depict Hamadryas baboons and just assume that baboons were once native to Egypt, or some people might still think they are native to Egypt even to this day. But they weren't, and they never were native to Egypt. They were importing them. And I bet you they didn't have a permit. There was no CITES listing on the trade of animals back then. So they were like, hey, that's an interesting animal. Let's take it back and make it a god. And obviously the ancient Egyptians were big on animal gods. You've got like Anubis, which was a jackal. Head of a jackal, body of a man. Obviously, Thoth was an ibis. He got the raw deal, Thoth. He's supposed to be like this super intelligent being, god. And they give him the head of an ibis. Like this, long beak. He looks kind of silly. Oh, man. But, they work. There's been evidence of mummified crocodiles in pharaohs' tombs, things like that. They were big on animal worship and animal sacrifice. Any animal that's around, it's like, let's dry him out, let's turn him into jerky and mummify him. And they did. They did it with cats. They did it with heaps of animals. But Hamadryas baboons were reserved for the real important people. Those poor, poor bastards. Imagine that. Like, hey, we're being kept. If that's not stressful enough, we're taking a boat ride up the Red Sea. And, alright, we're getting put in a cage. Oh, yeah, this is a bit, you know, this sucks a bit. But, oh, they're going to feed us. Wrong diet. We don't really eat that. But it's okay. We can just sunbake. Oh, no, we can't even do that. Too much shade. They've thrown shade on us. Oh well, could be worse. We could be getting eaten by a hyena or leopard back in our homeland. Oh wait, someone's coming in. Oh, they might feed us. Oh, no, they're leading us out somewhere. Wait, what are you doing? You're killing me. Oh, you're pulling my brains out through my nose and mummifying me. Now you're wrapping me in some toilet roll, like a mummy. Yeah, they got the raw end of the deal, them poor baboons. And they still do to this day. Baboons are looked at as nuisances. All species of baboons are looked at as nuisances because they raid crops, they burglarize people's houses. I find it hilarious, but I don't have to live with them. But, you know, at the end of the day, you moved in to the baboon's habitat, not vice versa. Those poor baboons. I love them. I love them. Anyway, hope you learned something about the plight of the Hamadryas baboon. Pretty interesting. And there is another monkey that has made a similar journey, but still very different. But I'll save that for another episode. And I'll see you next time on another installment of Thorn's Jungle. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.